All right, political psychology is not one of the major types of applied psychology, but nevertheless certainly impacts our daily life. So we're not together, so we won't actually discuss it, but pause for one moment and think, are you political? And if you are, why are you? And if you're not, why aren't you? And what does that word even mean to you? If you say, I am political, what does that mean versus somebody who says, I'm not political? What causes are you for or against would determine, what is in your politics. What do you believe in? What are you for? What would you stand up for? And then have you ever protested anything, which would probably in society be the ultimate form of, standing up for beliefs. Definition, basically psychology applied to political science, or psychology and political science applied to the human being. To understand how do people think, how do people feel about politics, political events, those who are involved in them. So the question is, why are you now involved? Why would you be involved in the future? What would be an important enough cause to pull you in if you think of yourself right now as kind of apolitical? Also, along the lines of what does it exist for? Somebody who practices political psychology would analyze events to make sense of the world. They would think of things as a political pattern. If this many countries decided this, then we might be able to predict that in 10 years they'll decide a similar they'll make a similar decision on some world event. If it's about oil or about the war, whatever wars are going on right now and or are being thought of right now, of what needs to be addressed. And then also, basically what I said, to predict future behavior and actions. If some extremist group has acted one way before, then odds are they going to act that way again? Political psychology essentially agrees that we are irrational beings. We don't make sense, and we can't be expected to always do the same thing in a good pattern, because we're individuals with different feelings, different moods, different people who are influencing our lives, and so we're not always trustable. So irrational beings, however, political beings. And while we're irrational, we do have things that motivate us differently than others. We do have personalities. We do have values different from other people, and sometimes different from ours, other values, depending on what group we're in. We have beliefs that change with new information, or maybe they don't change at all, no matter what new information you get. And we have groups that we are part of or we desperately want to be part of. And that can be more important than the groups you're part of, because what are you willing to do to be part of something? It's a question you should ask yourself. So political beings, otherwise known as us, we are political beings. Even taking a stand that you are totally apolitical or not political suggests you're a political being. That's a stance on politics. So political psychology, understanding of human beings as political beings with personalities. So like Freud would talk about personality being your id, ego, superego. The trait theory would talk about the different parts of your personality, how extroverted you are, neurotic are you, how emotionally stable are you, how conscientious, how open to new experiences. All of these things are parts of your personality. That is ruled by your values, or at least influenced by, but sometimes ruled by. What are you for? What did your parents grow up for, and what are they against? Sometimes you see this when people are for certain sports teams. That's not necessarily political, but probably that's as close as some people ever get to really formalizing a real stance on something. And they can't stand anybody who believes something else. So if you need to equate it like that, then there you go. Identity, it's influenced by how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as a person who always goes against the grain and doesn't want to be part of the established groups? Or the person who wants to belong? Influenced by attitudes? What is your attitude? Is the world always a dangerous place and no one should be trusted, or is it a place to keep working because there's always better around the corner? Influenced by your emotions. And if you've just broken up with somebody, your emotions can change drastically from 10 minutes before. And are you totally against something now when you totally were for it a while ago? And influenced by your cognitions, which in turn are ruled by your emotions essentially, but the thoughts that go through your head, the beliefs that you have, these not just by your emotions, but also can be influenced by just new material. You learned something from some new acquaintance or some new book that you read, and you incorporated it into your political beliefs. So you as political beings also attach to groups. People that are politically like-minded, which a group is just a bunch of people collected together who have a political view. So those are us and others are them. So if you're in your group with your people in your group, it's us and the others are them. So it's the in-group versus the out-group mentality, and suddenly you find yourself belonging and you don't care how much sense it makes or not at some point. You belong and they don't, and so they are wrong. Your group is right. And that's a fairly basic idea, but it's certainly true. So the us versus them idea gives you a social identity. Your social identity is, I am a member of this group. They are me and I am them. We are us. And that provides belonging and support and understanding. This is why gangs are so powerful. This is why Greek system is powerful. This is why any sort of grouping that takes people in and makes them feel part of something, it gives you an identity that you may or may not have had before, or at least it changes it in some way. And that is your social identity. And a lot of times people are willing to die for that social identity of what they believe. So derived by group membership, which is politically motivated. So that's how a political psychologist would think about people. We're acting in a way, but our behaviors are motivated by a lot of what I just said. So some examples of what political psychology would think about. They would try to apply political psychology to voting. Why do people respond to certain candidates with specific emotions? Why do they like this person and not like that person? Or like this person today but hate them tomorrow? Why do people vote the way they do, essentially? And two central ways of response. One for voting would be, one is fear or anxiety. And because you have this, you search out candidate info and make yourself very informed so that you can vote to see the outcome that you hope will happen. Enthusiasm can be the other response to candidates. They're very swept up in their message. Oh, I think this person's going to make change. I think this person's going to do what I want. I'm so happy. So it increases your likelihood to vote. Not as current, but healthcare reform has continued to be a big battle back and forth. It's a very political topic. Some people love it, some people hate it. You still hear constant discussion about the healthcare reform and what has that done. And so people who feel enthusiastic about it or fearful about it inform themselves in different ways and vote in different ways. Or vote for the people that are going to pass that, essentially. When you're voting for the people that are going to, initiate laws and so forth. Political psychology applied to advertising. Why, for example, one of the big questions is, why is negative political advertising found ineffective? So negative political advertising, it is found to be ineffective. And the question is why, and they look into that. One possible answer is that people want to, think highly of themselves as rational beings, and if you're just attacking someone else for their beliefs, then is that really the best basis for a decision? Although we could probably argue that the negative ads are what we notice, the mudslinging ads. So it's kind of a debated question over and over, but it's an example of how does advertising influence us politically. Politically applied to history, we've sort of said this one, but it's studying past decisions. How did people handle Vietnam? How did they handle the Bay of Pigs? How did they handle working with ISIS currently? Applying it to current group decisions, trying to figure out, can anything from the past influence what we decided for the future or even the present? Political psychology applied to media, and that's very similar to advertising, but the idea here, limited attention to politics. People have limited attention to politics because they have limited attention to everything. So if you're going to make sure that you grab their little bit of attention for your political movement, then you've got to rely on media sound bites. The little phrases, and you could probably think of some that you've heard in your lifetime for different campaign slogans. But these media sound bites equal agenda setting. And this, we've found links between the quantity of issue coverage and how important that issue must be. So if you see ads running for it 24/7, you start to think, oh, this must be very important, so I think I'll, be into that. That's not necessarily an accurate personal view, but we absorb a lot of times the things that are around us, which is why you have to be careful what you're putting into your brain. Political psychology applied to racism, stereotyping, prejudice, ethnocentrism, just the idea that there are political reasons for why people engage in any of these. It really goes back to that us versus them group. If we are okay, then they can't be. If we have this, then they can't have it. We have to protect what is ours, and sometimes that divides along race lines, and it's just an easy way to say, we're okay and you're not. And the word ethnocentrism just means that you have a very egocentric view about your ethnicity, that it must be the only right way, that any others have to be wrong just because they're not yours. So just a very global us versus them. Political psychology applied to nationalism. Why do people just love, singing the national anthem together at sporting events? Why do people feel very patriotic on certain points of the year, on Memorial Days? Why do people feel very strongly about our flag? Why do people feel very strongly about burning the flag? Why do some people hate that? Why do some people hate it but adamantly fight for the right to do it? It all signifies some level of belonging to your country, to the land that you're connected to, and that is nationalism, related to ethnocentrism. And then a few other tidbits. So political psychology also looks into topics such as, why is there political extremism? Looking back at the KKK or the new revivals of KKK, the Ku Klux Klan revivals, the neo-Nazis reviving in different countries in Europe. Why are there suicide bombings and death squads? Why are there people that connect with this and feel empowered by it and part of something? I think a lot of that can be boiled back to the us versus them. I feel like I'm part of something important. International security. How much or how little do you need to feel safe? There are political decisions made to decide that. And you may or may not agree with the level of international security that are set forth to make you feel safe. Political psychology set forth to understand poverty. What does that mean to someone's political views? People who are poor, who have grown up poor, who have very little, how do they see the world politically versus someone who's had their needs met? And then political psychology applied to immigration and forced migrants, people who are refugees running from some dictator or an asylum seeker because they've done something that they're in trouble for in their own country, or just displaced populations when there are wars or other sort of reasons like, famines that people migrate. How are these people, what is their political mindset? Usually, these kind of migrations aren't for positive things due to some extreme mental and physical stressor, and they come into their new location with a political viewpoint, maybe even an agenda, but certainly a view that there's a certain way to see the world, and then that could potentially clash with the political views of the situation that they've found themselves in currently. So, just a short look at Political Psychology, and we'll wrap up for now.